and that can demonstrate, like, I can, you can fire somebody and still honor their worth and dignity. Yeah. Right? That's the action and reception. That's the compassion and the demand. You can do both. It's a yes and, Yeah. So with this one client, I met him on the plane. We were on a family trip. We were in our process of moving here to Tucson, and he was with us in the cattle car in Southwest, right? And Matthew was in the window, I was in the aisle, and he was in between. And he saw that I was reading Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And he was asking me questions about it. We struck up a conversation. He was delightful. And he started to talk with Matthew too. It was really a nice little 1-hour trip. And a couple of weeks later, he gave me a call. And he said, I'd like to hire you. Mm-hmm. And the thing I remember about the plane trip was that one of the things he said within the first 5 minutes of the conversation was, I don't have a college degree. And for whatever reason, he felt the need to tell me this. I don't even remember what prompted it, but I did one of those note to self, this is a significant piece of data. Yeah. For whatever reason, it means a lot to him. And I got curious, which is what I do. And so then he calls me, and that's still in there somewhere. And we end up meeting regularly for a few months. And I took him through my standard program, actually. And I had to really trust myself because he was of a different stature. He, had the $200 or $500 shirt on. He always came dressed to the nines like he'd just, been in a high-end, shopping store or whatever else. You knew he knew how to dress. He had high standards, very elegant, a lot of quality, always open doors, made me, would never let me pay for anything, even though I offered. Complete gentleman, and he did all his homework, and he always showed up, and it was powerful. And we actually worked on the beach in the sand. It was amazing. And what came of it in the process is the main reason he called me was because he was at the helm of a big venture capital driven initiative. A lot of the funding was his, and it was apparently going very well, and so it was looking like they were getting close to commercializing in full, and they were going to start to name the board for that stage of the process. And he actually was concerned that he would not be voted onto the board. And my intuition was that it was in part because there's some issue about I'm not worthy because I don't have a college degree or whatever the issue was, right? And so got curious about all of that and never really asked it directly, and we just started to unveil, and when I was talking to you about the different parts we have, and some are stronger voices than others, and then there's other parts that are trying to get heard, but they're overpowered, and we need all the voices, right? And we need the ability to hear them. We need room for them to come out. We need an aware ego that can actually honor that process, just like in a good business setting. And so I was helping him do that, to tap into those voices. And as we unveiled and we went through different time periods in his history, and we were looking at the arcs and the endings of his life, one of the things that came out was that he had been diagnosed with dyslexia, but not till later. And he'd already been through a series of traumas associated with not knowing that and not having the tools and the skills to deal with it. And the talking about it was not therapy at all. It was really just an opportunity to revisit some of those moments and begin to renegotiate the relationship with them, and whatever was made up about it. That was still had a very, very tight grip, those old stories that we need to start to let go or revision. And then in the process of doing that, there's grieving. There's grieving for the little boy that couldn't catch a ball. There's grieving for the kid that could never quite get it together enough to be on the baseball team. There's grieving for the stuff that you yearned for that you couldn't do and you couldn't understand why. Or sometimes there's just grieving. We made this choice and not this choice. And even though they were both great choices, there's still grieving for the one you didn't make, or the yearning for it too. And he got to feel into that a little bit. And in the process of feeling the feelings, which were both celebration and grieving, it comes to a conclusion. It can be done. And that gets us present when we do that kind of work, right? And then once we're present and we don't have the overlay of, I call it, we live in the land of MSU, make stuff up. We don't have the overlay of whatever we've made up about it or we've dragged with us for the last 30, 40 years, right? Then we actually have space. And in the space, we can start to explore our different perspectives, our different options, our different paths forward, never requiring ourselves to do anything about it even. You know, and those of us who are type A personalities and are always making decisions and moving fast, and, you know, just like I'm talking, we're not used to managing those impulses. We're not used to not making a decision. We're not used to sitting with something for a while and being okay with not knowing. And then starting to notice, where's the aliveness? Where do I turn? Where do my dreams go? What are the symbols I'm noticing? And what the coaching did for him and has done for all my clients is that they get a chance to pause. They get a chance to sit. They learn how to hold the tension. Sometimes this or this is not the decision. It's usually something in between, or a third or fourth or a 10th option emerges when we've had the patience to hold the tension and to sit with it. And so that's what he was learning how to do. These are high-level skill sets, high-level self-management skill sets. These are like, you know, if everybody could get an MBA in life skill sets. And so he you could see him like be like, you know, and have all these like new stories about the old stories, and in the process start to put them in their proper place and get present. Well, make a long story shorter, you know, fast forward to the end of our time together, and a few different things. Number one, he said, my wife and my kids said, whatever you're doing with that woman, keep doing it, because we like you better. Which was really surprising for me to hear, because I can't imagine anything not to like about this man. I never experienced a side of him that I wouldn't like, and I spent enough time with him you'd think you would. So, you know, that was interesting. And another thing that happened is he actually asked me if I would consider working with his kids, which I've done a lot of with a number of my clients, and it's created this really powerful dynamic between them, because they have a shared language, they have more self-understanding, more other understanding. They can take what they're learning interpersonally in their personal relationships into their professional worlds. Everybody wins. Yes. So that was really powerful, and I ended up working with one of his kids, and we still have a relationship now with him and with his child. They were adult children, and I've worked mostly with adult children. And then, you know, fast forward, not more than a couple of years, he actually of course he got voted onto the board, and then, you know, but he stepped out altogether and let them run it. And he stepped into the next phase of his life, which for him, he was in his 60s, for him was a decision to be grandpa. And it was a decision he hadn't considered, because he was still, like most of my clients, in the striving, driving, pushing, perfecting, proving to everybody I'm worth it, which was, who was that speaking? Which voice? That was his 6-year-old little boy. That was the 14-year-old teenager that wasn't getting picked for the team. And you know, I almost want to cry, right? Because they get left behind. And the problem with that is, in the literal sense, in those years, there is the real disappointment, and there is the real sense of abandonment, like nobody wants me. The much harder thing to own is when you abandon yourself, and you don't even know you're doing it. Now, when we do this work, you start to see it, and so there's some grieving has to happen there too. And when you go into and through those emotions, on the other side is love, joy, and ecstasy, and lots and lots and lots of choice and power. And that's what every one of my clients gets to do. They choose powerfully, and they become a different kind of person and role model, like really the magnificent person that I see, that they don't always see. And they know they can be real ogres too. We all do. We all have all those parts. And they have much more capacity to manage that, and or to express it constructively. And it's a beautiful thing to watch.